Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Tiffany Benson, one part of Team Benson, and today I'm going to talk about starting yourself a patio garden and or expanding your small space or even large garden with pots. So when it comes to gardening, you can grow a lot of things in pots. There's all different size pots, whether it's something really large or something pretty small, but you can grow something in every type of pot. And you can even grow larger items, such as I got these 45-day cabbages, which I didn't know there was a 45-day cabbage, and since my cabbage is growing inside, I thought, well, if I can have cabbage in 45 days, then I can go ahead, plant these, have a cabbage because they were on sale, and then I can plant my cabbage that I have going inside in here and maybe have 2 rounds of cabbage. But anyways, when it comes to planting your garden, I have a very small space garden, but I have really expanded the amount of space that I can grow just by putting them in pots and maybe putting the pots on tables or putting the pots in front of the beds or whatever, but just literally lining everything with pots. And for those of you guys that have actual patio gardens, it's nice to be able to grow any size vegetable that you want. All you need is just the right size pot. So I like to have these. These are just simple, basic pots that you can get at Home Depot for like $1. I think I got them for like $1.29, $1.50, somewhere around there. And it's nothing too crazy, just a basic pot. Now I always get asked all the time, does it burn my roots during the summer? Because I have grown everything in here from like regular broccolis or regular cabbages to broccolis to even okra in these pots, and I've never had a problem, but that's because that's the way that my garden gets sun. So if it's somewhere where it is going to get too hot in my garden, for those of you guys that have desert gardens too as well, put it somewhere to where when it's in direct sun, if you get a black pot, then put it somewhere that's opposite of that. Now if you have a terracotta pot, know that it's going to dry out a lot quicker because terracotta pots absorb a lot of water. So I prefer just to plant in something like this, which is just plastic. I tell myself that it's okay because I've been reusing these pots over and over and over again. So every season I just give it a quick wash and then I'm ready for the next season. So I'm going to show you guys the 2 things that I'm going to use in order to fill this bad boy. So I'm going to use a combination of potting mix and then also compost. I find that if you grow things in a pot just full of compost, then it doesn't really hold enough water. So if you add a little bit of potting soil, then you can get all the great benefits and nutrients of the compost, but also have like the perlite and stuff like that in there in order to hold water so that it doesn't dry out so quickly. So when it comes to growing in pots, having the pot dry out is one of your biggest concerns. And like I was saying, if you grow it completely in compost, it's not going to have any coco coir or perlite in it to kind of hold that water in there. So that's the importance of adding the potting soil. But adding compost to your pot is also going to make your plants grow nicely because it's going to have all of that nutrients and all of that natural just greatness and minerals in it that compost has that you don't really get in bag soil. So sometimes I also put rocks at the bottom. It kind of just helps with the drainage, but you want to make sure that your pots have holes in them and even amounts of holes too as well in order for the water to drain, because you don't want to have wet feet on your plants. Like your roots don't like to be sopping wet. So you want to make sure that you have holes in them. You can also layer the bottom in rocks in order to not have it sopping wet too as well. Typically when I have a pot that doesn't have any holes in it, that I can't put holes in it, maybe like a glass pot or something like that, because I do have a couple of those, I will layer the bottom with rocks. That way when I'm watering it, I'm just conscious not to have it overflowing with water, and just to water it enough to where then that bottom layer where the rocks are will kind of hold the extra water, and then whenever the plant needs it and it's starting to dry out like the soil is, then it just absorbs that extra water that's in there. So since this one has holes in it, and also since I don't have any rocks right now and I really don't need them for these pots, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to put the bottom layer with the potting soil. Then I'm going to do the middle layer with the compost, and then the top layer I'm going to do the potting soil. Now what I found, and I've been growing in pots for a while now, so I think I have a great opinion on this, but it is my personal opinion, is that the top layer, the nutrients kind of gets washed away a lot quicker, and so as the plant's roots go down, they hit the compost, and that is just like an extreme boost of nutrients for your plant. And then they hit the bottom layer if they grow down that far, and that kind of just gives them a little bit more nutrients too as well. But passing that middle layer of compost is going to do a lot for your plants. But having also the bottom layer of potting soil makes it to where that bottom layer does not dry out, and it ensures it because it has that perlite and coco coir in it. So I'm going to go ahead and fill this pot the way that I just described to you guys. Now, one thing you're going to want to do when you are filling your pots is between those layers, you want to make sure that they're nice and moist. So you want to add some water. And so you don't want your water to be, or you don't want your potting soil to be like sopping wet, like you can like squeeze it and wring it out. You want it kind of to be a little bit crumbly, kind of like brownie mix if you are making brownies. So I'm going to keep adding my layers and mixing in some water. Okay, so I just added my layer of compost, and as you can see, it's pretty much right halfway. Well, a little bit, like 3/4 up to the top. And I did not mix it in all the way to the bottom because I do want to keep that layer of potting soil at the bottom and that middle layer to be compost. So now I'm going to put the potting soil on top and then add some more water, and then I'm ready to plant my cabbage in there. All right, so now I have my next layer, my top layer of potting soil. Now I don't fill it all the way up to the top because I'm going to add in my cabbage, and I'm going to make sure that there's enough room for everything, and then if I need to add more, I can add more to it. Now I also don't like to get it fully as wet as I got the other sides of it, or the other layers of it, because I also want to water my cabbage into as well, just in case my cabbage is a little bit dry or if it just needs some water. I want to be able to save a little bit of water to be able to water that in and not make the soil a big muddy mess. Alright, so now it's time to pot out the cabbage. So I'm just going to make a little bit of a hole right in here. Make a little bit of a hole. Find a cabbage. Now these cabbages I bought, so when you are looking at your start and making sure it's a healthy start, one, I never put a start that I buy in my garden in the garden right away. I always let it sit for about maybe 2 or 3 days and make sure that there's no bugs that can get introduced into my garden. I've had that issue before in the past, and buying starts that are pretty well established and started and have a lot going on can introduce bugs because they're not the healthiest of things, because they're still growing into a little container. And that's when you're buying starts on sale, because typically they have been growing for a while. I just got water leaking on me. They've been growing for a while and they've already passed when you should have been planting them if they're giving them to you on sale. So the next thing I want to look at is how many cabbages do I have in this little pod. Now in this one I have 2, and I only want 1 because it's not going to be able to grow 2, and you want to be able to grow 1 full cabbage. So I'm going to pick which one looks the best and the healthiest. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by taking off all the bad leaves. So that way it'll give me a better idea of which one is the healthiest. And I think that I'm going to go with the less leggier of the two. And what I mean by that is that this one has a very weak base, where this one is thicker. So I'm just going to cut that one out. And you can save those greens, you can eat them, you can do whatever you want to do with them. Those are going to go to my worms, because my worms love cabbage. And then when I put it into the ground, I'm going to put it into the pot to about here, so that it's not burying it deep like you would do a tomato, but it is giving it enough stability to where it can hold itself up. So we got it in there just like that, and I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more dirt to it, and then I'm just going to water it in, and I'm going to plant out the rest of these. Now, another important thing that you could do is, if you're in a desert climate and you're having a hard time with retaining water, you can also add wood chips to these. I typically don't add wood chips to my spring and winter and fall vegetable plants, just because, well, sometimes in the fall I do, but winter and spring I definitely don't, and that's just because it's not hot enough to where the pot is drying out quickly. So I don't add the wood chips to it. The other thing is that when you're using an organic potting mix, like I use Kellogg's, it has little bits of wood chips in there, so that does help it retain water. So I'm going to go ahead and plant out the rest of these and then show you what they look like, hopefully before the sun is down altogether. Alright guys, there we have it. And now all 6 of them are nicely planted and ready to grow me some cabbage. And I just put it right next to my patio bed, so they're going to get tons of sun and grow happily next to other cabbages and other brassicas just like them. So just to wrap things up, make sure you guys are saving your pots when you get them, because different things like this, I one day needed basil, and so instead of buying just a little bitty piece of basil, I bought a pot of basil, used the basil that I needed, planted the rest of it in my garden, and I saved the container. Because even these little containers like this basil cost me, I want to say $2, and the basil grew itself out once I planted it in my garden, and then now I can use this to grow me more herbs or medicinal medicine or other little small vegetables or anything, and just place it around my garden. I can even grow radishes in this because it's deep enough. So make sure that you are using everything that you can and using the space that you can to the fullest. One of the nicest parts about growing in a pot is that you can chase the sun when you need to chase the sun. Meaning that if you have a space that only gets bright sun on one side and then bright sun on the other side, and it's like part of the day and then part of the day, you can move the pots from one side to the other and chase the sun. So until next time, I hope you guys are growing yourselves amazing gardens, because even a small space can provide you with tons of food. Bye guys!